محمد كما باركت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم في العالمين إنك حميد مجيد. أما بعد, inshallah, this session is supposed to be in matters of fiqh, as they translated jurisprudence or whatever legislations, rulings, but we'll stick to the word fiqh. And this is something that we need to practice in matters of the deen, that we stay with the terminology that the Muslims agreed upon, and then we explain the terminology, so that when we talk about fiqh, we get to know the meaning of it, but we stay with the word fiqh, instead of using words that can mean or has certain backgrounds to the people, those who use different languages and so on, because words are unique in the religion of Islam. Like many words, like salah for example. When people translate it to be prayers, prayers would mean differently to the people, those who English speakers, can mean maybe dua, right? Prayers to them is dua, but salah to us is a special meaning to the salah. It's a special act of worship that starts with the takbir and ends with the taslim. So we should stay as and say it as salah, and then explain what salah is. So one of which also is the term al-fiqh, because fiqh literally in Arabic language means the understanding, or the proper understanding. And this is something that the Prophet ﷺ said in the authentic hadith in Shaykh Imam al-Bukhari, مَنْ يُرِدِ اللَّهُ بِهِ خَيْرًا يُفَقِّهُ فِي الدِّينِ. Whoever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants good for, يُفَقِّهُ. The verb is mentioned here. يُفَقِّهُ فِي الدِّينِ. That means He will make him have fiqh in the deen. Fiqh meaning the understanding. As Imam al-Bukhari rahimahullah, he put the title for this Babul Fahm fil Ilm, the chapter of the understanding in matters of knowledge. And he mentioned this hadith. So al-fiqh basically means the understanding of the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But its mean in this context is to get to know the different rulings with its evidences from the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. Why is it important for us to study the rulings and matters of fiqh? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created us to worship Him alone. وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ. And for a person to save oneself from the hellfire, a person has to embrace the religion of Islam and believe that there is no one worthy of worship except Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam is his final messenger. And this is what comes the subject of the tawheed and the matters of belief. If a person embraces the religion of Islam like this, he saves himself from entering or from to be among the people of the hellfire, those who would stay in it forever. But that by itself, as far as the matters of Aqidah alone is concerned, won't guarantee for the person to be free absolutely from the punishment of the hellfire, unless a person would worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and fulfill the orders of Allah, and do what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ordered us to do, and to stay away from what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forbade us of doing. And this is also part of the tawheed. The whole religion of Islam is tawheed. So al-fiqh is part of the tawheed, as they say it's from muqtadayat al-tawheed. As a result of the tawheed, you have to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If you say that there is no one worthy of worship except Allah, then where's the worship? You can just say it as much as you want, but then you don't worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What's the benefit of this? Basically, the person is lying. He's not truthful in his belief. If you believe that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the only one worthy of worship, then we have to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is the subject of al-fiqh. How to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And how to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, of course, is according to the way of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. We have the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, and as we heard yesterday, that they're both wahy from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. These are matters of belief. Both wahy from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's why we get to know these rulings from both the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. The meaning that we need to keep on repeating over and over again, which makes the religion of Islam unique, that the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ were not discovered 100 years ago, or 200 years ago, or 1,000 years ago, and then people start interpreting and reading. Maybe it means this, maybe it means that. This is not the case. It was practiced. Revelation comes down to the Prophet ﷺ. The Prophet ﷺ would act according to the revelation, explains to the people how to do things, and the Sahaba radiallahu anhum would practice that. So the practice of the Sahaba radiallahu anhum and their understanding, they passed that to the next generation and to the next generation. And this is how the deen of Islam came to us. And that's why the major things in the religion, like for example the salah, you won't find differences in the principles of the salah, the time for the salawat, the number of rak'ah, and so on, because this is something that was passed on through witnessing and actions by the Prophet ﷺ, not just by words that can be interpreted or not. And the Prophet ﷺ said, "Sallu kama ra'aytumuni usalli," pray in the same manner that you saw me praying. So people would watch the Prophet ﷺ and they would record that and so on. So it's definitely such an important thing, and we cannot perfect our religion, we cannot worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala unless we know what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants from us with regarding to the way we worship Him subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's why fiqh is made of two parts, two major parts. The first part is fiqh al-ibadat, and the second part is fiqh al-mu'amalat. Fiqh al-ibadat, the fiqh of worship, right? In the more specific meaning to it, because as we said, the purpose of our life is to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So mu'amalat or transactions are still matters of worship. Anything that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves, this is part of our deen, part of the worship. But to be more specific, when the word ibadah is mentioned, maybe it deals with the rituals, like the salah, the things that we would do as a specific acts of worship. So this is the first type of matters of fiqh. How to do the different acts of worship. It is the first part because this is the rights of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on us. And that's why the ulama, they would put it first in the books of fiqh. So these are the rights of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, so it has to come first. And the first or the most important thing is, which is the second pillar of Islam, is the salah. So the first subject is the salah. And the salah, we do not just say Allahu Akbar and we start the salah like this. We have to have wudu. And we make wudu with water and not juice. Right? So we have to know the rulings of the substance that we make wudu with. So the books of fiqh would start with Kitabul Miyah, for example, the book of water. Right? What are the characteristics of the water that we use to make wudu? Is it anything liquid we can use for wudu, or it's a specific thing? So these are the conditions for the salah, the things that comes before the salah. And of course, anything that we study in the deen of Islam, it's based on the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. So this is the first part. The second part is fiqh al-mu'amalat, or the transactions, the rights of the human beings, buying and selling, with all of its different rulings, different types of contracts, marriage, inheritance, all different types of relationships and so on. And this is also something very important. And that's why, how can we make salah without knowing how to make salah? It's not left to our desires, it's basically deen knowledge. It means we have to make sure that we pray the proper way, especially if we're living at times of fitan and things are different and so on. We have to take it upon ourselves that we learn, that we get to know, so that when the day of judgment comes, we did the best of our ability, that this is, a person would say, oh Allah, this is to the best of my ability, the way that I get to know the prayer of the Prophet ﷺ. So that when you are praying, to the best of your knowledge, this is the way of the Prophet ﷺ. Because this is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ordered us in the Quran. So learning this, and also how can a person buy and sell without getting to know the rulings of buying and selling. Umar radiallahu anhu, when he would forbid traders from being in the market unless they learn the rulings of buying and selling. Is it mandatory for every Muslim? Not mandatory for every Muslim to know, but for those who are in that business, if they don't know the rulings, if they don't ask the people of knowledge, they have constant someone or close to them that would show them what is right and what is wrong. If they don't have this, they would fall into haram, definitely. And there's no excuse. Somebody would say, I didn't know the ruling. Is that an excuse? And it's not a sinful thing? In matters of riba, as Imam al-Qurtubi rahimahullah, he said, when a person falls into riba, if he doesn't know, he still has no excuse. Because he's supposed to learn or ask someone that knows, right? So we cannot just leave ourselves like this, deal with many different transactions in our life and get into things without knowing whether this is halal or haram, especially when we know that things like that is being spread, meaning disobeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in many things, especially in matters of transactions. Many people, they get married and they don't know the rulings of marriage and divorce and so on. And that's why they would divorce their wives and then they regret and they come and they say, I said this or I said that. Is it valid or not valid? Is it divorce or not divorce? That means people need to get to know these things because it's very dangerous. So this type of knowledge is definitely mandatory for us to learn and to understand. And if the month of Ramadan comes, we learn the rulings of fasting. If you go for Hajj, you learn the rulings of Hajj. So the more the person is exposed to different things, then of course we have to learn these things. The book that we will inshallah go through, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us life, is a book for beginners. And this is what we need to be in that level, inshallah ta'ala. And the author of the book, he made it for that reason, for someone that is beginning to learn matters of fiqh. Although when we come into the level of learning the deen, the subject or the language is the language of the Quran, the Arabic language, of course. But we're basically now here, this is a session in which we would get to know what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants from us so that we would worship Allah. The level of being a student of knowledge, this is a different level in which a person would study the language of the Quran, the Arabic language, and give the time to do that. So then when a person would study the matters of deen, he studied by the language of the Quran so that he would have the proper understanding. Otherwise, if we put the Arabic language aside, we would always have misunderstandings. We would always depend on someone that understand the language of the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. Otherwise, you become following the madhab of the translator, right? So the translator would have his own madhab because he's translating. And we need to, but definitely there is no harm for us to learn, to get to know what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants from us. So this book is a very small book in quantity, but mashallah is very big and huge in its meanings. And it's by Imam Sa'di rahimahullah, the one that has the famous tafsir. And his books, mashallah, has so much barakah in it, and the ilm in it, and the words of these books has so much great benefits from it. And I would say that, of course the ulama, they say that, but when you start teaching his book, especially like his book of tafsir Imam Sa'di, so much great benefits, mashallah, that you would learn from his book, and it's very precise and short and to the point. So he has a very small book in matters of fiqh. You probably heard it before, and I think it's translated also in English. It's called Manhaj al-Salikin or Minhaj al-Salikin wa Tawdih al-Fiqh fi al-Din. Manhaj meaning methodology. Al-Salikin means the path seekers. When you know, even the word maslak, right? Maybe some of you know the word maslak or way or path. So the methodology of those who are seeking the path and making it clear matters of al-fiqh in the deen. So making clear some of the rulings of matters of fiqh. So I don't have a copy of the book in my hands now, so I will just take it from here, inshallah ta'ala. And as everything else, you would find there's an introduction to anything and any knowledge. There's an introduction to it. And the same thing with matters of fiqh. He rahimahullah this is why the books are easier. At least to me, so it's still in no. I would skip on the first introduction that he mentioned that this is a very summarized book in matters of fiqh. He compiled in it some of the masail and the evidences, and he kept only in it the major issues in matters of fiqh. Because again, this is the first level, and we have to go gradual when it comes to matters of knowledge, like everything else. When somebody would rush into something that is over his capacity or over his level, this can cause so much harm to one's understanding. And that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when the ayah ولكن كونوا ربانيين بما كنتم تعلمون الكتاب وما كنتم تدرسون, ربانيين, as they translate it, sometimes they say lordly people. But as Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu, he said, these are the ones that would start with the small issues in matters of knowledge, and then they go to the bigger ones, meaning the easier ones to be understood, and then after they finish that, they go to the second level. The way of the people of knowledge, for those who are studying matters of fiqh, the first level, right, first grade, if it's correct to say that, is that they go through all the different masail or matters of fiqh just to understand what the mas'ala is, just to understand what they are talking about. Not the ruling of whether it's wajib or haram or mubah or whatever. No, the first level is just to comprehend the mas'ala itself. So for example, if they're talking about the mas'ala or the issue, you know what mas'ala means, right? Matter of the fiqh, for example, with regarding to the najasa, for example, something related to the najasa or impurities, just to understand what is the meaning or what is the nature of this issue. And this is the first level. So if someone would go through all the book of fiqh, first grade, right, to get to know each mas'ala, understand it very well, and what does it mean, then this is, mashallah, this is the first level. Of course, a person needs to know how to do things so that he would worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So his shaykh or his teacher would tell him to do this or to do that, one opinion and that's it, right? And he would do that because he trusts the one that he is seeking knowledge from. Then after that, a person would go to a higher level in which he would get to know each mas'ala or each issue with its evidence, right? And he would study that. Why the ruling is this? Because of the evidence such and such. And then after that, the next level is to get to know maybe the differences of opinions. Of course, he would study that in the madhab or whatever. Then he would get to know the differences of opinions. And then the differences of opinions with each, their evidences, if there's differences of opinions. And the evidences of each group and what each group responded to the opinion of the other group. Right? So it's more and more deeper levels. And of course, if someone passed all these levels, and if a person is a person that is scholar in the religion of Islam or scholar in matters of fiqh, this is not a simple matter, right? And that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ordered us to ask the people of knowledge if we do not know. So he made it very precise, and that's why in the introduction he started by talking about al-ahkam al-khamsa, the 5 rulings that will be mentioned in the book. Anything, any ruling has to be one of 5. We can say anything that we do in our life, we can classify it under one of 5 rulings. Anything, even that you're sitting now in this place, it's either one of 5. The first one is al-wajib, which is, al-wajib means mandatory, right, or obligatory, right, which is a person would get rewards if he do it, and if he doesn't do it, he is subjected to the punishment of Allah because it's mandatory, right? And this, of course, many examples, like for example the salah or different things in the salah and so on. So this is the wajib, right? We're not getting into the details because some people would say there's wajib and there's fard. There's difference between both. To the majority of the scholars, it's the same thing, and it's only just a matter of differences of terminologies, right? And some, as Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah, he gave the word fard more weight than the word wajib, right? But both, if you leave it, this is a sinful act, and if a person would do it, he would get rewards. And the best of the rewards are given when a person would do what is wajib, what is mandatory, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves these deeds the most, and that's why He made it obligatory on us. That's why it's the most rewardable act whatsoever. So we need to know what is wajib, what is our the mandatory things on us to do. And that's why, without exaggeration, anything that is wajib on us, like the salah for example, right? If you there's some salah that is wajib and some salah that is recommended, like the sunnah prayer versus the fard prayer. If someone misses the fard prayer or leaves something in the fard prayer, right? If he prays all of one's life optional prayer, it won't be equal to the rewards of the fard prayer. Because this is fard, and this is nafl or optional salah. Many people in Ramadan, they would never miss the Taraweeh prayer, which is a good thing. Inshallah, we should not tell anyone, don't pray Taraweeh, right? But at the same time, they would not come for the Fajr prayer in Ramadan, mathalan, right? Or they would miss Salatul Isha now. Which is more rewardable? Salatul Isha tonight, or the whole month of Ramadan, Taraweeh prayer, including Laylatul Qadr. Taraweeh prayer, including Laylatul Qadr itself. Which is more rewardable? The Isha of tonight. Why? Because this is fard, and the other ones are not fard. Right? It doesn't mean that we stay with the fard and we leave the optional salah. But these rewards for the optional salah, it's the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for those who are guarding their fard. Right? Someone that is a merchant, he has to have his store open to make money, right? So when he gets more profit in the season, right, this is more and more of the goodness, mashallah. But he cannot close his shop after the season is over, otherwise he won't get nothing. So he has to have his store open at all times. So of course the example is not as clear as I mentioned with this, but this is how the wajib or the fard compared to what is optional. It's not belittling the optional acts of worship, but to make sure that the wajib is something that is very big. Go ahead. Now, the majority of the ulama, there is no differences because they both fit the same definition. But sometimes when the word fard is mentioned, it means what is bigger wajib than the wajib. Like the 5 daily prayers, it's fard, right? And they would, for example, say that growing the beard is wajib, right? But it's the same thing, right? It's the same thing with the same concept, but one is bigger than the other, and they're both in the same category of being mandatory. And this is in the issues on with the subject of usul fiqh. So this is the wajib. The opposite of the wajib is haram, right? And the haram is, what's the definition of the haram? When we defined al-wajib is ما أثيب فاعله وعوقب تاركه. The opposite of that is the one that the wajib, if you do it, you're rewarded. If you don't do it, you are subjected to the punishment of Allah. Why subjected? Because a person might leave it and then he dies in the state of Islam and Allah forgives, right? So we say that he deserves to be punished. If he's punished by the justice of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But if Allah forgives, Allah is the most forgiving. The opposite of that is the haram. What is the definition of haram? The haram is, if you do it, if you leave it, you get rewards. If you do it, you subject yourself to the punishment of Allah, right? So there is reward for leaving, for doing something what is it called, negative. If you don't do anything and get rewards, this is the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the reason why you're not going after the haram is because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forbade it. If it was permissible, you would go after it. You get rewards as a result of that. So this is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants from us from the haram. Can haram be in something that is recommended? Yes. If you start praying 2 rak'ah, optional salah, or sunnah salah, right? It's not mandatory. Can you just walk out without no reason like this? Or start eating and drinking while you're making the optional salah? It's haram to do that. Although the prayer itself from the beginning is optional. But once you started it, then it becomes mandatory for you to finish it. Unless you have an excuse, that's different. The same thing for Hajj and Umrah. If you did your obligatory Hajj, if you did the obligatory Umrah, with the difference of whether Umrah is obligatory or not, an optional Umrah for you, not mandatory, right? But once you become in the state of Al-Ihram for Umrah, can you just take off your Ihram and leave? You cannot do that. Although it's optional, but you cannot do that because once you are into this ibadah, you cannot leave it. So the haram can be also by leaving something that is recommended. So again, this is something to be known by the knowledge of the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet. So this is wajib versus the haram. And then you have, with closer to the wajib is al-mustahab. Al-mustahab is the recommended act. The recommended act is the one that a person, if he does it, he gets rewards. If he doesn't do it, he does not get punished for it. Right? But should we leave then the recommended? No. Because if you believe that it's recommended, this is the effect of our aqidah again. If you believe that this act is recommended, when you say, I believe that this is recommended, based on what? Based on how it feels? No. Based on the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, there's evidence, wahi. That means if you believe like this, then you should do it. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala like for you to do it. So you should do it. You do the best you can, you do it. Right? So, but then why you get to know that it's recommended? Because if it interferes with the wajib, either you do the wajib or what is recommended. Time for the salah comes and you can go and give charity to someone that is poor. Either or. Of course, we put forward the wajib, the mandatory. So this is the benefit of knowing what is wajib and what is recommended. Many people, they have good intentions, but good intentions alone is not enough. They have to know what is right and what is wrong and what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants from them. And the more the person elevates oneself in matters of iman, the more you would find that you have to choose between so many different good things. Which one? Which good that you should do? This good or this good or this good? Then the knowledge comes in place. To get to know exactly what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants from you the best. And that's the knowledge of maratib al-a'mal, the levels of the deeds. Right? The famous hadith or incident at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, when they were traveling and many of the companions were fasting. And some of them, they were not fasting. And it was too hot. As the narrator of the hadith, he said that they had to have something on top of their head to shield themselves from the sun. And if someone didn't have anything, they would put their hands on their heads. Very hot, right? And when they stopped to rest, those who were fasting, they fell. They could not do anything. They were exhausted. And those who were not fasting, they're the ones that build the tents and get everything, in place and so on and so forth. The Prophet ﷺ, after seeing that, he said, ذَهَبَ الْمُفْطِرُونَ الْيَوْمَ بِالْأَجْرِ. He said, those who are not fasting, they surpassed the rest with the ajr, with the rewards from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They get more rewards today, although they were not fasting. And fasting is the best deed. As the Prophet ﷺ said to Abu Darda radiallahu anhu about fasting, لا عدل له. There's nothing like fasting. And we know the hadith of fasting and so on. But in that one incident, right, those who are not fasting, they get more rewards. So this is something that a person would get to know by knowledge when it comes to something delicate like this. But anyway, so we have the mustahab, or the recommended act, or the masnoon, and it's different terminologies. In the context of fiqh, the word sunnah is used in the context of fiqh. The word sunnah is used for what is recommended, right? The word sunnah in the books of fiqh is used for what is recommended. The same word sunnah can be used in books of aqidah to refer to matters of aqidah. So it depends who is using the word the sunnah. And that's why we have to be careful. If it's the subject of the fiqh, the word sunnah means it's only recommended. It doesn't mean that the sunnah has only the recommended. The sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ has the obligatory and has the haram and the recommended and everything. So masnoon or mustahab is, as we heard. The opposite of the masnoon or mustahab is al-makruh. Makruh literally means disliked. If a person do it, there's no sin. But if he leaves it, he gets rewards. If he leaves it, he gets rewards. But if he do it, there's no sin. So it's not haram, it's a lesser level. Right? And again also, for those who would read in the books of fiqh, it depends on what a scholar is, especially from the early generations of Islam. The word makruh, when they mention it, sometimes it means haram. So you have to understand the terminology of the book, the terminology of the scholar. That's why in Madhab Imam Abi Hanifa, for example, there is the makruh tanzihan wa tahriman. Right? Makruh tahriman means haram. Makruh tanzihan, that means it's in the level of the makruh, and so on. He says here, Imam Sa'di rahimahullah, وَيَجِبُ عَلى الْمُكَلَّفِ أَنْ يَتَعَلَّمَ مِنْهُ كل ما يحتاج إليه في عباداته ومعاملاته وغيرها. قال صلى الله عليه وسلم من يريد الله به خيرا يفقهه في الدين. متفق عليه. After mentioning the 5 rulings, he said it's mandatory on the mukallaf. What's mukallaf? Meaning the held accountable person. When a person reaches the age of puberty, he is mukallaf. Right? If he dies the same day that he become or reach the age of puberty, he's either or she either will be in Jannah or the hellfire. That's how serious it is. That's why in Islam there's no such a thing as well the age of teenagers. They're basically irresponsible for their actions. It doesn't work this way. They should be responsible for their actions. Why? Because in the religion of Islam, it's not by the 18 years old. It's by the age of puberty that changes from one to the other. And that's why we are ordered to prepare them earlier than that. 7 years old, as the Prophet ﷺ said, you order them to make their salah. They have to make all of their salah 7 years old. Fajr prayer, even if it's too early. Of course, it's when they're 7 years old, they do it willingly. There's no, they don't, refuse whatsoever. But again, it's a matter of getting them used to it, so that when they reach the age where they are responsible, then it becomes in their norm. So it's mandatory for every mukallaf to learn these rulings, to learn what is needed for matters of ibadah and mu'amalat, in your ibadah and your transactions that you would deal. As the Prophet ﷺ said, the hadith, مَنْ يُرِدِ اللَّهُ بِهِ خَيْرًا يُفَقِّهُ فِي الدِّينِ. Whoever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants good for, He would make him comprehend the religion of Islam. Then he starts with the book of Kitab al-Tahara. Kitab al-Tahara, or the book of purity. Book of purity, because this is the condition for the salah. Right? You have any questions? We'll take just one issue in the book of Tahara, and then we'll stop, inshallah. The word Tahara. What's Tahara means? Purification. Right? The religion of Islam, if we talk about fiqh only, we're talking about other things too. The religion of Islam is based on 2 things if you look at it with the Tahara perspective. With purity and non-purity perspective, half of the things that we do in the deen is purifying, and the other half is to adorn oneself. You clean, and then when you clean your house, you clean it first and then you put the furniture, for example. Right? You clean yourself and then you put your clothes on, or put perfume on. Right? But if you put a good smell on yourself when you're not clean, gives a very bad smell. Right? So you have to clean. And this is, again, as I mentioned that before, this is how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created us physically. And this is one of the things that you can enjoy looking at the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Anything that Allah created physically, in the ways of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on the earth, you would find similarities to it in the deen of Islam, because it's all from Allah. And there's so much harmony between the creation of Allah and the things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created physically and the things in the deen. So the same way we have to clean ourselves physically and then adorn ourselves and beautify ourselves with other things, the same thing the deen of Islam. You have to purify yourself. You have to clean yourself physically, to be able to make salah, and our heart has to be clean from sins and from evil things and so on, for the heart to enjoy the sweetness of al-iman. And we talked about that before, right? So in matters of fiqh, the same thing. There is purification. We have to stay away from what is impure and clean ourselves from what is impure, so that we will make our salah or make our ibadah and so on. And that's why the tahara or purity is based on two things. To be able to stand in the salah, we have to have tahara or purification from two things. Tahara, taharatul hadath, or tahara min al-hadath, or tahara min al-khabath. Right? Two things, hadath and khabath, very close. We can easily memorize them. Hadath and khabath. What's the difference between both? The dal and the ba. Hadath and khabath. Right? Hadath, right? What is the definition of hadath? Is what breaks the wudu, basically. It's not something physical that you can touch, but it breaks the wudu, like passing something from the front or the back, right? The action itself, not the impurity that comes out. The impurity that comes out, that's khabath, that's impure, right? But the action itself, that something came out from the front or the back, this action itself, this is called hadath, right? So if this happens, even what comes out is pure. That breaks the wudu, that makes it invalid for someone to make salah. And there's no shyness in the religion, right? Somebody passes wind, right? This is pure. The wind is pure. It's not impure, right? It's pure, but it breaks the wudu. It's the action itself. If somebody inserted medicine, right, and it came down exactly the same, nothing changed in it. It entered and it came down, right? This action of coming out, coming down, that breaks the wudu, right? So this can be under the meaning of al-hadath. So taharatul hadath, to be pure from the hadath, from the things that breaks the wudu, as we will get to know the details of that later on, inshallah. So we have to be clean from this, and we have to be clean from al-khabath. Al-khabath means from khabith, right? Which impurities? The physical impurities. And also this is something that is mentioned also because khabath or impurities is not something that we leave it for our own likings and things like this. You might get disgusted of something and someone else doesn't. So it's not according to our desires, it's according to the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. So for us to be able to make the salah, we have to be free from impurities. Our bodies and our clothings and the place, the spot that we make salah on. These three areas has to be clean from impurities. Our clothing, our bodies, and the spot that we pray on. It has to be clean from impurities, and the impurities are mentioned also in details. What are the impurities? And again, how to do that, because sometimes people get into one of the two extremes. And the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ is away from any forms of extremes. But since we mentioned that later on, inshallah ta'ala also, impurities are not to be known by under the microscope. The deen is easy. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent the Prophet ﷺ, he said, alayhi salatu wasalam, نحن أمة أمية. We are illiterate nations, right? We do not read or write. It doesn't mean, some people think that this is a negative thing. No, this is to praise the ummah. That means you don't need so much sophistications in matters of deen so that you would worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You don't need discoveries to be able to worship Allah. If you are in the desert, in the jungle, you're the same as someone that is in the most sophisticated lab. All of you can make salah and can make wudu. Very easy. So some people, they go into extremes when it comes to impurities. They say maybe something in the carpet that maybe we take a sample and we can analyze it. Maybe there is something. There's no such a thing. If you don't see it, if you don't smell it, right? If you don't touch it, that means it's not there. Some people say, but people walk with their shoes and they enter the bathrooms and they come out and they walk into this carpet. Right? This is a common thing that we say all the time. This has no validity to it whatsoever. When people are at work and carpets like this, right? People at work, they have carpet like that, and they won't pray on it. You have to get your prayer carpet with you. Right? You don't have to get anything. وَجُعِلَتْ لِيَ الْأَرْضُ مَسْجِدًا وَطَهُورًا. But they would say, but the carpet is different than the earth. Right? Do you smell najasa on it? If you go down on the ground, do you smell something impure? If you say yes, then don't pray on it. If you don't see it, if you don't smell it, then it's pure. Who would ever say that this is impure? Right? So this is the ease of the matters of the deen. The same thing you can say to the earth outside. So again, but we have to make sure that our bodies, our clothing, the ground is clean from impurities. And there's differences, as the ulama, they say, between al-hadath and al-khabath, more differences. But are we late now? No, it's time for Isha prayer. Are you with me, or is it too much complicated, or it's easy? One of the things, of course, he mentioned the hadith of the pillars of Islam, but since we talked about al-hadath and al-khabath, which is rulings in matters of ibadah, if you break the wudu, right, something happened and you broke the wudu, that means you have to go make wudu, right? Very clean, very normal. But if you have najasa on you, if you have impurity on you, urine or something or anything, do you have to go make wudu? No, you don't have to make wudu. You just clean yourself. It doesn't break the wudu to have some form of najasa on you. You just clean it. So the order is to clean the impurities. But the tahara from al-hadath, you have to make wudu. You have to do the wudu from the beginning to the end. So if you, after you finish the salah, you remembered that you broke your wudu, that means you have to go make wudu and repeat the salah. But if after the salah you remembered or you saw on your clothing that you didn't see before that has impurities on it, do you have to repeat the salah? No, you don't. If the salah is finished, you don't have to repeat the salah then. Right? If you are, while you are making salah and you see some impurities on you, or you remembered that a dog licked you, for example, right, and you're wearing a coat that is impure, what do? You just take it off while you're doing the salah and you throw it on the side and you continue your salah. This is something the Prophet ﷺ himself did when he was in salah, and Jibreel ﷺ came to him and he told him that there's impurities in his shoes. So the Prophet ﷺ, leading the people in the salah, he took off his shoes while in the salah and put it aside. So the Sahaba saw that, they took their shoes also, right? Because they follow the Prophet ﷺ. This is how they follow the Prophet ﷺ without, if this is something happened to us, we were going to say maybe there's something that the Prophet ﷺ did that for. Sahaba radiallahu anhum, they had this full submission. The Prophet ﷺ took his shoes in the salah, they took their shoes in the salah. And then after that, they didn't even say anything. The Prophet ﷺ asked them, why did you take your shoes off? So they said, O Prophet of Allah, we saw you taking your shoes off, so we take the shoes off. He said, Jibreel came and told me that there is impurities in it. And when he took them off, والسلام, he didn't repeat the part of the salah that he had the shoes on while he was still in the salah. He didn't repeat anything of that. So this is with the khabath and the hadath, the difference between both. Right? Then the next subject is to get to know what is the hadath. Right? What are the things that breaks the wudu? And what are the najas, what is the impurities that is mentioned in the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, that if we have it, then we have to clean ourselves, and how to clean ourselves from the najasat. This is all means of knowledge. But again, one last thing is, since we are, alhamdulillah, especially for those who come to the masajid, they would make sure, which is a good thing, we would make sure that there is no impurities whatsoever. To make sure that our salah is valid. And we make sure that we are in wudu, complete purity, mashallah. And that shows how we give so much importance to the orders of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And if a person has a drop of any form of impurity, he would make sure that he would clean himself very well before he comes to the masjid. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants that from us. The person is rewarded for this. But at the same time, Are we doing the same thing to our hearts before we come to the masajid and before we do anything? The same thing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants from us. And that is to purify ourselves from matters of shirk, from matters of envy, from hatred to Muslims, from all kinds of evil things. And to always purify ourselves and adorn ourselves with what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants from us. The first type of purity would validate or invalidate our salah physically. And the other form of purity will be the matter of khushu', that people will be so much difference between one to the other when it comes to rewards as a result of the inward purity. How pure the hearts are, then the rewards will be accordingly. So this is, it's the toughest work, and that is to purify our hearts from sins and things of that nature. We'll stop at this point so that we don't take too much of your time. But inshallah, we didn't start yet with the book of the Tahara. The book's supposed to be short, but I'm taking too much time. Inshallah, just maybe this time, but next time will be more precise, inshallah.